Hey everyone, I welcome you all to this video. And today in this video, we are going to discuss about some other DAX functions, important DAX functions. And I hope by this time, since in the previous two videos, we have discussed about like around 25 DAX functions. So by this time, you at least know that how different DAX functions can be used to perform certain calculations and how they can be used to create calculated table, calculated columns and measures, right? So that's the one point. Also, before beginning, I would like to tell you something about the measures and calculated columns. So as far as calculated columns are concerned, so they occupy physical space in your model and thus they increase the size of your model. While if I'll talk about the measures, so measures are nothing but the dynamic calculations and they are calculated on the runtime. So they occupy negligible space. That's why if there's a situation or a case wherever, if it is possible that you can achieve what you want to achieve using measures, so instead of creating columns, prefer creating measures, right? Because columns will ultimately, since they will be physically present in the model, so they will increase the size of the model and then the report performance is also impacted by it. So you should keep that in mind. Now let's discuss about an important interview question that is generally asked in Power BI interviews. So they can ask like, what is the difference between sum and SUMX function? So we will take an example to first of all understand these two functions, and then we will begin with our discussion about different contexts in DAX. So basically in DAX, we have two main contexts. The first one is row context and second one is filter context. So we will discuss about that as well. So first of all, let's discuss about like what is the difference between sum and SUMX functions. So I will simply first of all right click on this date table and then I will create a new measure and I will name this measure as sum function. And let's say here, since we will be using the sum function, so on the right hand side of equal to, I will simply write sum, press the tab key. And now you can see that Power BI shows you the definition of this function, that it will take only one argument as the input and you just simply need to provide the column name. So since let's say we are interested in finding out the sum of the values in month number column in date table, so I'll simply write month number and it will show you the different option that is available. Just simply select it, press tab key, close the bracket, press enter. And now let's just, we are interested in representing the value contained in the SUMX function on the report area. So I'll just simply click here on the blank area on the canvas and expand the visualizations pane. I'll simply click on the card visual and it will create a blank card for us. I will further resize it. And on this card, having this card selected, I will just simply click here on the sum function. And let's say since we want to add a border to this card visual, so I'll simply click on format your visual, general, effects, and we'll change this border to on and then simply click on add data to your visual. And now let's say I want to move this sum function to some other table. So we will simply click here on home tab and then we simply click on enter data. And since we have already one table by the name measures table available, we used it in the previous videos. So I will name the newly created table for this video as measures table 1. And press enter. So it will create a new table for us. And now I will simply click here on the sum function under the data pane in this data table. And then, all right, first of all, click here on the blank area on the canvas. Now click on sum function. And now you can change this home table from here. Let's keep it measures table 1. And now from here, you can simply remove under the measures table 1, you can remove this column 1 because this is not needed. So delete from model, yes. Now let's collapse this date table. And this is the table that we are using, that is measures table 1. Now we have created sum function. Now let's create SUMX function as well. So I'll now right click on measures table 1, new measure. Let's name this measure as your SUMX function. On the right hand side of equal to, let's write SUMX, press tab key. Now for SUMX, you need to provide two arguments. So the first argument is table and the second argument is an expression. So since we are going to use the date table. So I will simply single quote, type single quote, select the name of the date table, comma. Let's say again, we are interested in finding out the sum of the values contained in the month number column. So I will simply write month number, press tab key, close the bracket, press enter. Now let's say we want to represent the value contained in SumX function in a different card visual. So I'll simply click here on the blank area on the canvas. I'll click here on the sum function card visual that is available on the screen, Control C, Control V. I'll move the second card visual and let's keep it here. In this card visual, I want to represent the value contained in SumX function. So I will simply remove the sum function from here, and having the second blank card visual selected, I will simply click on SumX function. Both of them are representing the same value, right? But if I will talk about the SumX function, then for the SumX function, the expression was evaluated for each row since it is an iterative function. So the expression was evaluated for each row and then the sum was calculated in the end. While if I'll talk about the sum function, so it will simply find out the sum of the values contained in a given column. That's the difference. Now let's say there's a requirement that we simply do not want the sum of the values contained in the month number column, but we want that twice of that should be given to us. We want twice of sum of the values contained in month number column. We cannot achieve it using sum function, but the same can be achieved using SumX function. Let's see how. So I will simply click here on SumX function, and here in place of this date table month number column, I will simply write date table month number multiplied by 2. So what this SumX function will now do, it will be evaluated, since it is an iterative function, it will be evaluated for each row. And for each row, month number will be multiplied by 2. And then in the end, the sum of the expression that is evaluated for each row will be calculated, and that will be returned. And then you will be able to see that value on this particular report. So I'll simply press enter. And now you will see that the value has changed to 4766. You will not be able to achieve the same using sum function. Let's see how. If I'll click here on sum function, let's click here on sum function. And let's say here we have supplied the column, the name of the column, date table, month number column. Let's try to multiply by 2 here and let's see what happens. So if I'll multiply by 2 and press enter in case of sum function, you will see that it will throw an error saying that sum function only accepts a column reference as an argument. So you cannot write an expression here for sum function, but you can do so in the case of SumX. So that is the difference between SumX function and sum function. And since for SumX function, the expression is evaluated for each row, so the expression is evaluated row by row by row, and then the final sum is being returned to us. So this is something referred to as row context, right? Because the expression was evaluated for each row. And this is not only for SumX function, but this is for other X functions X as well, right? May it be product X, may it be average X, count X, your different X functions that we use. So since calculations take place row by row, expression is evaluated row by row, it simply means that these are iterative functions and they work in row context. So this is something that is referred to as row context. Now let's take an example to understand about your filter context. So I will simply click on the plus icon. Basically, there are two main contexts in DAX. The first one is row context and the second one is filter context. So I will simply click here on the blank area on the canvas, and then I will click here on matrix visual. This will create a matrix of blank pivot table for us. I will further resize it. Matrix visual is also called pivot table. Now having this particular matrix visual selected, I will expand the data table that we have. And let's say here in the rows, I want to represent the month short name. So I'll simply double click on month short name field and will drag and drop it here under rows bucket. Similarly, I will double click on the weekday short name column under the data pane and will drag and drop it here under the columns bucket. And let's say for the values, we want to represent the sum of the values contained in month number column. So I will simply double click on the month number field under the data pane and will drag and drop it here under values bucket. So you can now see that the sum of the values contained in month number column is being represented for different months and days. So if I talk about this particular value, that is 20. So when this 20, that is the sum of the values in the month number column, was evaluated, before that, before even the calculation happened, two filters were applied. That is, two filters were applied on the data. That is, month was chosen as April and day was selected as Friday. And then the sum of the values contained in month number column was figured out, and that is being represented here. Similarly, if I take some other example, let's take the example of this 60. So first of all, two filters, that is month short name equal to December and weekday short name equal to Saturday, was applied on the data, and then the sum of the values contained in the month number column was figured out, and then that was displayed in this visual, right? So this is how the filters work in the case of the visuals that have been represented. That is the matrix visual that we have, and this is something referred to as filter context, because before evening the calculation took place, filters were applied, right? So this is something that is referred to as filter context. So that is all about the row context and filter context. So these are two main contexts, and there can be questions around it in interviews. And also there can be questions around like what is the difference between sum and sum x, and they can in fact ask about other x functions as well in the similar way. So we have already discussed about the answers. Now let's say we are interested in creating a new table wherein we want to use the date table only, but we want data only for January month. In this date table, data is available for all the months. If I will click here on the table view and having this date table selected, if I will further click on month short name, you can see that data is available for all the months, January, February, March, all 12 months, right? But now I want to create a table based on this date table in which data should be available only and only for January months. That can be achieved using calculate table function. I will simply click here on the report view, and I will simply right click on, I will simply click here on the modeling tab, and then we can simply click on new table since we are going to create a new table. And I will name it as calculated table. And then after this equal to sign, we can simply write calculate table function. It will simply show you the name of the function. Select that function, and now in this function you have to provide the name of the table as the first argument based on which your calculated table will be created. So I'll simply write single quote and I'll supply the name or provide the name of this table, and then comma. Now you need to provide the filter which will be applied on this table, and then the calculated table will be created based on that. So let's say I want month short name to be December, so I can simply write month short name equal to, inside the double quotes, DEC, close the bracket and press enter. So you can see that calculated table, this has been created with all these columns. Now let's go back to the table view. So I'll simply click on the table view and let's click on this calculated table. And now let's click on the drop down to see the data is available only and only for December, right? Since we have chosen December, so the data is available only for December. Now let's say I want to apply one more filter. I do not want data only for December, but I want data only for December, and that to Friday only. So I will again go back to the report view. I will click on calculated table. And after this December, we can write comma and we can provide the next filter. So you can provide one or more than one filter. So let's say we want the weekday short name to be Friday, so FRI, and press enter. Now if we will go back to the table view again, you will see that data is available only for December and the weekday is Friday. So you can create calculated tables from the existing tables using calculate table function like this. So this was about the calculate table function. Now let's discuss about other functions. So I will simply right click. I will click here on this new page, and this will create a new blank page for us. I will first of all simply click here on the blank area in the canvas, and then I'll simply click on the table. So it has created a blank table for us. And now let's say on this table, we further want to represent all the different months from the date table that we have. So I will simply double click on this month short name under the data pane and will drag and drop it here under the columns bucket. So you can see that different months which are available in our data set are now being represented in this table visual. Now let's say corresponding to each one of the months, we also want to represent the sum of the values contained in the month number column. So I will simply double click on this month number field under the data pane and will drag and drop it here below month short name. So for each month, you can see that sum of the values contained in month number column is being represented. Now let's discuss about calculate function, right? So I will simply, since we are going to place all the measures in the measures table 1, so I will further right click on measures table 1 and then I'll click on new measure. Since we are going to discuss about calculate function, so in place of measure, I will simply write calculate function. And on the right hand side of equal to, we can simply write calculate. Power BI will show you that these are the different options that you can choose from. Choose calculate function. And now for calculate function, you need to provide an expression. So the expression will be that we simply want the sum of the values contained in your month number column. So inside the calculate function, in the expression argument, we can further write sum, press tab key, and provide the name of the column. So we have month number column. Press tab key, close the bracket. Now you can mention different filters that you want to apply on this. So let's say we want the sum of the month number column values to be calculated only for, let's say, your December month. So we can write month short name should be equal to, inside the double quotes, TEC, and close the bracket, press enter. Now let's represent the value contained in calculate function in this table visual that we have created. So I'll simply first of all click here, blank area or the canvas, then I'll click here on this table. And now I will simply check this box before calculate function. Now you can see that the sum is being represented. All right, so this is not matching. We will again click here on calculate function. So here we have chosen this calculated table, right? We should have chosen the date table. We want for date table. So no problem. We can change the name from here. In place of calculated table, we can simply write the name of date table. And we can choose date table month number column. Press tab key. Shift, just remove the name of this column. This is extra here. Press enter. All right. So now it shows 372 as the total because we have chosen only the total for December month, that too from date table only. So you can see that here in this first column, the values are being represented for each month. But if I'll talk about this calculate function, then it represents the value only and only for December month. So although this month filter is applied in this particular table visual, but still the filter mentioned in calculate function overrides it, right? So in this way, calculate function can be used to modify the context in which filters work or filters are applied, right? And it is a powerful function. It is a strong function. And we say that calculate function is a magical function because it can be used to modify the context, and this fulfills and suits our requirements, and we use it time and again. So you should have a good idea of this function. And this is, again, if you are preparing for Power BI interview, certainly questions are going to be asked around this DAX function, specifically calculate. So you can see that the filter that is mentioned in the calculate function overrides other filters which are available on this particular table visual. That is the first. Now, with calculate function, we can use some other functions as well. So we are now going to discuss about those functions. So I will simply right click on this measures table, and then I will select this new measure. And then I will name this measure as, since we are going to talk about all functions, so we will simply write all function. In the right hand side of equal to, we will use calculate function, and with the calculate function, we'll be using your all functions. So I'll select calculate function. Now the simple expression that we want to write is that we want the sum of the values contained in your month number column. So in the expressions, I'll mention sum, press tab key, then month number from your date table, right? From date table. So mention that date table. Last time we selected the column from calculator table, no problem. So close the bracket, comma. Now in place of filters, we are further using all function. Press tab key. Now you can either use a table name or a column name as an argument in the all function. So since I do not want any filters to be applied from this table while this all function measure will be calculated, so I will simply write the name of the table here. So the table is named as date table. So we can simply write the name of that table, close the bracket, it will close the all function for you, close the bracket again, so it will close the calculate function for you and press enter. Now let's see what happens. I will simply click here on the blank area on canvas. Now I'll click here on this table visual that we have created and I will simply check this box before all function. So now you can see that this total, that is 2383, which was being represented here at the bottom of the sum of month number column, it is now being represented against each month, right? Against April, against August. So for each row, the value remains same. That is, it remains equal to the total. Why? Because of the all function, all the filters which are being applied on this table were ignored. So calculate function along with all function was used. So you can simply see that the context in which the filters were applied was modified. Now this was all about the all function. Now let's say we are further interested in finding out the percentage contribution to the total for each month, right? So these are the different values that we have. And then we want a percentage contribution of each one of the values. So we can achieve that as well using divide function. So I will simply right click on measures table 1, new measure. Let's name this measure as your divide function. And in the divide function, you just simply need to provide a numerator and a denominator. So first of all, we will write divide. And you can see that you have to provide a numerator, denominator, and then you can provide an alternative result as well in case you are dividing by 0 or if there is some sort of situation like that. But that is not necessary to be provided. But numerator and denominator has to be provided. So let's say for the numerator, since we simply want the sum to be there, so I can simply write sum. And then we want the sum of the values in the month number column. So we can simply specify month number from date table month number, close the bracket, comma. Now you need to provide the denominator. So these values for each month have to be divided by 2383. That is the total, and it is available for the all function column because we want all the filters to be ignored, and then the contribution has to be calculated. So further in the denominator, I will use calculate function. In the calculate function, we will use an expression that is sum of values in month number column. We'll close the bracket for sum, then comma. For the calculate function, we will say all, press tab key, and then we will say that for date table, we want none of the filters to be applied. Close the bracket, close the calculate function, and close your divide function, and then press enter. It might take some time to create. Now I'll click here on the blank area on the canvas. Now let's click on the table that we have created. And then now let's check this box before divide function. So you can see that the total in the divide function is calculated, but the sum should be equal to 100%. It is not 100%. Let's see what went wrong. Just simply click here on this function. Again, here we have chosen this calculated table. So we should mention, we can remove this probably from here entirely. We can simply write the name of date table. And from the date table, we want the sum of the values in month number. Press tab key, press enter. So now you should see that the sum of the values contained in the divide function should be equal to 1. And if we will multiply this divide function expression by 100, then it will give you 100%. So I will simply multiply this divide function expression further by 100. So this gives you the percentage contribution of each month to this total. So the total is 2383. And let's say if I'll talk about April, so the contribution is 120 in terms of number and the percentage contribution is 5.04%. If I'll talk about September, so in terms of a number, 270 is the contribution, and 270 divided by 2383 multiplied by 100 will give you 11.33%. So in terms of percentage, its contribution is 11.33%. That is how divide function can be used, right? Divide function is a math function in DAX, and there are other math functions as well. We'll discuss about that as well later. So now let's talk about other functions, that is all selected and all except. So in interviews, they can generally ask questions from, like they can ask this question as well, like what is the difference between all function, all except and all selected? So we will try to understand that using an example, right? So I will again right click on this measures one table, and then I will simply say new measure. And here we will be talking about all selected functions. So I'll write all selected function. On the right hand side of equal to, we'll write calculate function. Then we simply want the sum of the values from the month number column from the date table. We'll select it, close the bracket, and then we will use all selected function this time. In place of all, we are using all selected. Here also you can provide the name of the table or column, since we do not want any of the filters from the table to be applied as far as this table visual is concerned. So we'll simply write the name of the table. So we'll write date table, close the bracket, close the calculate function, press enter. And now I will again click here on the blank area on the canvas. Then I'll click here on this table, and I will simply check this box before all selected function. And you can see, like for all function, the values were shown as the total was basically being shown. Similarly, for all selected function also, the total only is basically being shown. So there is no difference between the values. But let's try to add a slicer on this page. So I will first of all click here on the blank area on the canvas, and I'll click here on the slicer. So slicer is nothing but a visual filter. And I'll further click here on the slicer. This is a blank slicer that has been created. I will further in the slicer, let's say we want to represent different weekday short name. So I will simply check this box before weekday short name from date table, and it now represents different weekdays. Let's select Friday and let's see what happens. If you select Friday, you will see that for the all function, the values are still not changing. It was 2383, now also it is 2383. But for all selected function, the value has changed to 344. And 344 is the total that you can see now on the screen, because this filter or the slicer has been applied. So explicitly we applied a filter. So whenever explicit filters are applied, in that case, all selected function will be dynamic with respect to that, right? Values will change for all selected function, but for all function, the values will not change, right? You can choose some other example. Let's say we have chosen Monday. So now you can see that for all selected function, again, the value is filtered and the total is being shown to you as 336. While for all functions, still the value remains the same. The old total that was shown, that is 2383, when no explicit filters were being applied. So you can simply remove this filter as well. So that is the difference between all and your all selected function. And now let's talk about all except function. I will again simply right click here on the measures table 1 and then new measure. And then let's name it as all except. On the right hand side of equal to, we will again use calculate function, because these functions can be used with calculate functions to modify the context in which an expression is evaluated. So we will simply write sum of the values contained in month number column, close the bracket, close the sum function, comma. Now we will write all except and then you are required to provide the name of the table, and then you need to provide the name of one or more than one columns. So since we'll be using date table, so I'll simply provide the name of the date table, comma, the column that we want to supply. Let's say we want to write the name of weekday column. So we can simply write weekday short name, let's say, and press the tab key, close the bracket, close the all except function, and then close the calculate function, press enter. All right. So let's first of all resize this slicer, and let's keep the slicer here. All right. We can probably add a border to this. So FX and border. Similarly, we can add a border to this table as well. So add a border. Now let's come back. Okay. So now in this particular visual, let's see what happens when we will be adding. One second. Let's resize it. Okay. When we will be adding your all except function here. So I'll simply just click here on this table visual that we have created, and I'll check this box. So you can see that as of now, the total is being represented to you as 60, right? So I'll just simply click here on all except function. I think, yes. So here we have again used the calculated table, but we should have used the date table. So I'll remove it again, and we will write the name of date table. And from date table, we want the sum for month number column, press tab key, and now press enter. All right. So this all except now shows you the total sum that we had here only, right? If I will further bring one more column in this particular table, that is your weekday short name column, then let's see what happens. So I'll just simply double click on it. We'll drag and we'll keep it here just below the month short name column. And you will see that the values in the all except function have changed. So the values have changed with respect to weekday. So the values are getting filtered with respect to the weekday short name that we have provided, but the values are not getting filtered with respect to the month short name. Why is it so? Because if we will further click on the all except function, then here you have clearly written that all the filters should stop working only except one filter, that is the weekday short name filter. So weekday short name filter is still working for this all except function. All except function, this weekday is still working. For Friday, you will see that the total is 344. If I'll select Friday, then for all the Fridays and all the months, you will see that the total for all except function is 344. If you'll select some other day, let's say you selected Monday, for Monday, it will be like 336, right? So the total is going to be same. The month short name filter is not getting applied for all except function, but weekday short name filter is getting applied because you have specified it here in all except function. Now, let's say in place of this weekday short name, we want to provide the month short name, and let's see what happens. So in place of this weekday short name, let's write month short name, and let's see what happens. Press enter. And now you will see that these weekday short name filter will stop applying, but this month filter will now apply. If I'll further click on, let's say Friday, any particular day, then you will see that all except function has different values for different months, because for different months, the filter is still getting applied, right? But this short name weekday is not getting applied for all except function. So this is the difference between all except, all selected, and all function. And these functions are used along with calculate function to modify the context in which an expression is evaluated or calculations happen. So this is again an important interview question. So I hope this video was helpful, and we'll meet in the next session. Till then, thank you. Bye-bye.